Hello, this is the Green Corn Rebellion Show. Today I'm here with Brittany Novotny. She's my friend who used to live here in Oklahoma, but now lives in Minnesota, correct?
That's it.
And and she wanted to come on the show and talk about the presidential primary and the delegate counts and the poll numbers and say where she thought things will go.
Yeah, you betcha. That's what I'd love to do here. I know you're a Bernie Sanders fan. I've been pretty open on Twitter as an Amy Klobuchar supporter, so I just want to put my biases out here from the beginning. But I'm not coming here, representing any campaign or anything like that. I'm actually currently not being paid by anyone, not even Bloomberg. um, and I'm an attorney. I'm a political consultant. I have managed field and messaging for multiple legislative races all over the country: Oregon, Colorado, Oklahoma. I've run for office myself I ran for the state legislature in 2010 in Oklahoma. I was the first out trans woman to run for office in Oklahoma against the notorious homophobe Sally Kern. And that kind of got me in the spotlight. And I've also been involved in civil rights litigation. I've sued police departments for civil rights violations on behalf of folks who were wrongly arrested or roughed up. I have Actually, I was on the trial team in November 2017 for the first ever trans discrimination case to make it to a jury in the Federal Western District Court of Oklahoma. We took that to a jury and won a $1.165 million verdict on our client's behalf. It's proof that, when your messaging connects with people on a shared values level, even in a conservative place like Oklahoma, you can make progress. So that's a little bit of my background and kind of where I'm coming from, looking at this race and seeing where things are. Um, I imagine you guys are probably pretty happy with Bloomberg right about now. Um, would that be accurate?
No. I
No.
mean, it definitely makes the race more interesting, but I mean, I'd rather he had stayed out of it. Uh, now it's kind of just like, I mean, I doubt he'll get the nomination, but just the thought of the fact that he's in the race is still kind of like a nightmarish scenario that we're having to deal with. So yeah.
What really sparked me to want to come on was when it hit me last week as I started looking at the delegate math,
Mhm.
uh, that Bloomberg's presence in these Super Tuesday states, he got into this race claiming he's got to stop Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
He thought all the Democratic candidates sucked and they weren't going to be able to stop Bernie, and he was going to be that moderate alternative that arrived on Super Tuesday. But what he's inadvertently done is, right as the race was starting to kind of clarify a little bit after New Hampshire, and we were starting to maybe see where the strengths and weaknesses were of the candidates, he threw this big monkey wrench into the whole thing, took
Hmm.
away all the momentum that Pete and Amy were starting to build up as the moderate alternatives, just stood right in their way. You see it reflected that their poll numbers are about half
Yeah.
what they were in New Hampshire going into these Super Tuesday states. So I mean, he's just taken up a big chunk of the lane that they were trying to vie for, which, if you look at the delegate math, really works out in Bernie's favor now.
Hmm.
Um, because Bernie, you guys have a pretty solid base. You got like maybe 25 to 35% of the party is part of this progressive wing that pretty much has really throughout this process has stayed home with Bernie. Some of that wing flirted with Warren for a bit. I
Yeah.
think she still needs some of that, and maybe won some of that back over with that fiery debate performance.
Oh yeah.
But um, there's no real other lane opening for her. My
Yeah.
cat's trying to play with my cord here. Um, and so, you've got that 30% that you're going to get at basically every state because, like, Bernie's numbers hold about steady no matter which
Yeah.
state you look at because it's that solid chunk of that progressive base. Whereas everybody else's numbers kind of fluctuate state to state. And so, what's going to happen is on Super Tuesday, March 3rd, about just under 40% of all the delegates that are to be awarded in the primary are being awarded on that day. And
Hmm.
it looks like right now, based on that last debate the other night, I don't see anybody stepping down
Yeah.
between on March 3rd. They all think they're the right candidate. Everybody dug in. I didn't see any signs anybody's feeling the pressure to leave. Um, and so what's going to happen? They're all going to split that vote. Bernie's going to be the leader in pretty much every state at right around 30%.
Hmm.
And so he's going to rack up a lot of quote unquote wins. I mean, to whatever degree a 30% showing is a win, but it's a win when you're getting more than the other candidates.
Yeah.
And he's going to come out of Super Tuesday with a delegate lead similar to what Hillary came out of Super Tuesday with in 2016. And because Democrats split those up proportionally in each state, it makes it almost impossible to catch up
Yeah.
once that lead is built. So the real question will then become as we move past Super Tuesday and this wears on into April, May, June, do any of these candidates drop out at any point? Who do they put their support behind? And, you know, is that string of wins on Super Tuesday enough to propel Bernie to grab a greater percentage of the Democratic vote? Because I think if he starts grabbing 40 and 45% after Super Tuesday, he's going to start getting closer to hitting a majority before the convention.
Yeah.
But what I think everybody needs to remember is that the Democratic Party has a nomination process, and that goes by delegates. And so to win the nomination, you have to get a majority of the delegates, not a plurality. So if he only gets 30% from here on out and everybody else keeps splitting the vote, 4 or 5 other ways,
Hmm.
then what we could be going into in July in Milwaukee is a convention where Bernie's the leader, but not such a strong leader that the nomination's his.
Yeah.
I think the higher above 40% he gets on those delegates, the stronger his argument will be that you can't go against, the people have chosen me. If it's
Hmm.
under 40%, that's a lot harder sell because then you're saying, well, yeah, 60% of the people didn't want me, but I'm the guy still. Um, so that's going to be the really interesting thing to watch, and I just don't see any sign right now that the splitting's going to stop. And I think that we're going to go into a convention that it's going to catch some people off guard because a lot of people don't understand the delegate rules and how that all works. But the campaigns certainly do. And at the
Yeah.
last debate, one of the last questions that all the candidates were asked were, should the delegate leader get the nomination? And they all said, no, it should go by the rules of the convention, except Bernie kind of hedged and said
Hmm.
something about the will of the people, but he wasn't super clear on whether that meant will of the people at convention, will of the people and majority of delegates. He's certainly trying to keep his options open, which if I was advising him, I'd tell him the same thing. Don't commit right now one way or the other because,
Hmm.
you don't get stuck in a position where, you're going in with 45% of the delegates, but you committed to the rules,
Yeah.
and now you can't make that case that you should get the nomination. So
Hmm.
this is going to be really interesting, and I would just suggest to Democratic voters, strap in, calm down, don't freak out. We're going to get there eventually, and we'll figure out who we're going to have to rally around at some point.
Yeah. That's kind of what I've been thinking about it too. 'Cause after Super Tuesday, because what is it? In some of those states, or most of those states, even, I think it's pretty much between like Bernie or Bloomberg possibly winning. Like I think in Oklahoma, the last poll I saw, it said Bloomberg and Bernie are both at 22%. I think
Yeah.
something like that, which is pretty scary to me because I was like, whoa, like, eesh. Um, but uh, but yeah, I think it's pretty interesting, and um, the whole what is it? The do you think that it's possible? Because I think this is possible that the amount of actual like raw votes that the candidates get, like that, is it possible for Bernie to get 40% of the raw votes that were cast in the primary, like in every state, but not get 40% of the delegates? Is that possible?
Yeah, it's possible because it's
Yeah.
the delegates in each state, and each state kind of sets their rules, but most of them go by any candidate who breaks 15% in a
15%,
congressional
yeah.
district qualifies for delegates. If you break 15% statewide, you generally qualify for delegates. So depending on how each state kind of apportions them, it gets a little wonky, just like, with the Iowa thing, how even though Bernie technically had more votes,
Pete
because
came
of the
out
way those
with one more
votes were
delegate.
split up,
Yeah.
Pete got the one extra delegate because of where they came from, and so it gets a little wonky like that. Um, but I mean, it generally approximates pretty close to where the popular vote percentage is, plus or minus 5% or so.
Yeah. And then there's also super delegates. That's also will eventually be an issue because supposedly on the first
Would
ballot,
be.
yeah, on the first ballot they're not supposed to vote. That's supposed to be just the what's it called?
The pledge
The
delegates
pledged
vote
delegates, yeah.
first.
And
And
then
those are the ones that you want in each state that were
yeah.
broken up by the districts and all
Mhm.
that.
But the super delegates, because I think this is what people's problem with the super delegates are, they don't necessarily have to follow the will of the voters in their respective states and or districts that they're from.
Correct.
So
They're
therefore, like that'll become an issue whenever the convention comes up because like what was it? How many Congress people have said that they're gonna that they've endorsed Bloomberg? Like I know that Gregory Meeks guy has. Like I
yeah,
don't think like I
he's
don't
got
think
several of those
yeah.
endorsements. He's
Like
making a strong play for that.
yeah, like I don't think their constituents are going to be very happy with that. Um, but I think that the super delegates that becomes an issue, and I feel like the super delegates should be pressured more to vote in line with how their districts or how their states voted, because
Well,
that
there's one way to do that, and
yeah
that's for people in those districts to
yeah
start lobbying those members of Congress today and saying, hey, like I watched that debate. This Bloomberg guy is just a facsimile of Trump. And
yeah
like, I don't want to vote for blue hat Trump
yeah
over red hat. I want to vote for a real Democratic candidate and start pushing that now.
yeah.
Don't wait till July because the longer you wait, the less they're going to know what that input is ahead of time.
Yeah,
And
and
you're going to have to be competing with a guy who is bankrolling these folks' campaigns
oh yeah.
and promising them lots of spending with his super PAC
Hmm.
that you know, I can't I can't totally blame members of Congress for being seduced by it. Um, One of the things I think we as voters don't always give our Congress members credit for is just how dang hard it is to stay in Congress, especially if you're on the Democratic side, where you rely on not just, a few big corporate donors, but you've got to literally be dialing for dollars like 20 to 30 hours a week. Like
Yeah.
the DNC has a call center like across the street from the Capitol. So these
Hmm.
guys can go walk back and forth between their offices at the Capitol and the call time rooms at headquarters so they can do their fundraising. And it's
Yeah.
hard work. As someone who ran even just for the minuscule state legislature, having to raise just $60,000 to be competitive in that campaign took a lot of time and effort and work. So when you got a guy out here like promising to keep you from having to call and beg people for money all day,
Yeah.
it's real enticing. It really is. And I think it's still unethical. I don't like it. And I'm
Hmm.
not trying to defend it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to explain it in human terms because, it's real easy to sit back and point fingers. But
Hmm.
if you've ever actually been in those shoes or sat in those seats, you start to understand the pressures they're under and why that looks good and enticing in the moment.
Hmm.
But the good thing about a representative democracy, we can let those folks know, like, no matter how much like money you're being promised, we're never going to vote for you again if you do
Yeah.
this.
um, so do you have any predictions for how the rest of the primary is going to go? Do you have any predictions for Nevada tomorrow?
Oh man, Nevada, it looks like Bernie's got it pretty locked up, but it does look like he's got it locked up in that 30 to 35% range rather than, a higher number.
Yeah.
But he's definitely going to come out and be announced the winner whenever they eventually count all the votes.
Whenever next week or 2 weeks from now.
I'm
Yeah.
certainly not expecting this to go smoothly. The way I understand what they're doing in Nevada, they had over 70,000 people show up for early ballots,
Hmm.
which they basically filled out a ranked choice ballot, picking their top three. Those ballots, because the caucus locations are different than what the early voting sites were, somebody's got to literally go through and organize and say, these go to this caucus site, these go to
Yeah.
this, and then you got to have the volunteer at the caucus site know how to add that up and how it's going to be added in. I guess they're giving them all iPads that they're supposed to punch these numbers into. And if you've ever been to a polling location or a voting site, you know that a lot of the volunteers that run these things tend to be kind of advanced in age.
Yeah.
So sometimes expecting them to use a bunch of new technology and a bunch of new voting processes, no matter how good that process may be,
Hmm.
you've got users that aren't familiar enough with it, and there's going to be issues.
Oh
And so
yeah.
I don't see any way around there being issues tomorrow with that many early votes that came in, and who
A
knows
lot
how
of
many
them.
more people are still going to show up on caucus day. So
Yeah.
I would just not anticipate getting all the results tomorrow.
Yeah. What is it? The early so far they say that the early vote how many early vote ballots they've got is almost as much as people who voted in the Nevada caucus last
Yeah,
time.
they
It's like
had, I think,
like
like
20,000 less.
84,000 showed up total in
Yeah, it's like
2016, and now they get like 70 just in the early. So the turnout speaks really well. That tells me we've got a good chance of locking up Nevada in the blue column in November.
Oh,
Um,
definitely.
so that's good. I was certainly disappointed with the Iowa turnout, but
Hmm.
um, from what I'm kind of gathering from folks I know on the ground there, they think that there was a lot of just paralysis of like they talked to a lot of voters at doors that were like, you know what, I'm gonna vote blue in November, but there's just too many choices. I kind
Yeah.
of like them all. I don't feel strongly enough about any of them to go stand in a caucus for 3 hours. Like, leave me alone. You got my vote in November. So maybe, maybe we shouldn't read too much into the Iowa turnout, but
Yeah.
I think maybe we are suffering from a little bit of the too many choices dilemma.
Oh, yeah. What else is there? So do you have any uh, um, predictions for what you think might happen at the convention in November, or not November, in July?
My big worry is Bloomberg because he I think has been looking at this contested convention plan for a while.
Yeah.
All of what he's been doing with you know paying for projects in various mayors' cities and buying up these endorsements, and I've heard some scuttlebutt that I can't prove with documents, so I want to make clear it's at this point, rumors, but I am getting them from sources that I trust, that are telling me that people who are trying to be delegates to the convention are getting calls from Bloomberg officials offering to pay their travel and room and board,
Wow.
and basically like, yeah, you vote for whoever you got to on first ballot, but come second ballot, you're going to remember that I paid for you to get here and made sure you had a room.
Wow. Oh no.
And so that's I think what we've got to look out for. Um,
Hmm.
all this talk of the DNC rigging it, that's just not accurate. I mean, Tom Perez, people can say what they want about his leadership on various issues. I don't know, but he has been doing all he can this cycle to try not to put his thumb on the scale. Like,
Yeah, because like that was my
really,
whole thing was with Iowa, it was the state party that decided to buy the app and
yeah,
do whatever they wanted with the like, and I was like, we should like, I have my issues with Tom Perez, but if we're gonna make anyone resign from this, it should be whoever runs the Iowa State Party, and then eventually their chair ended up resigning, and because what? How much was it that they ended up paying for that app? I think it was sixty
it was a little
thousand
over
dollars.
60, I think 60 or
Yeah, like
60,000, which for a state party is a pretty
that's
large
a lot of
expense.
money. Like
Yeah,
if I found out that happened here in Oklahoma, I'd be pretty mad about that, especially knowing that the state party is hard up for money, or at least it has been in the past. Like that's a lot of money that could have went to literally anything else that was productive. Instead of
yeah.
an app that you would supposedly use once every 4 years. Uh, but yeah,
And then, I saw people pointing to like the list of like showing who all's used Shadow as a vendor as somehow like proof that like Pete Buttigieg was involved or something. But like Pete was as screwed over as anyone out coming out of Iowa, because like he should have had like a moment that night to be like, oh, I've made history. And like he
mhm.
kind of did, but it kind of got overlooked because everybody was like, oh my God, they can't count the votes. Oh, what a disaster. And like he really didn't get the momentum he was looking for out of Iowa. So I don't see how he benefits there. And the list included like Kirsten Gillibrand and a couple
Joe
other
Biden and
parties, and
yeah,
like they're just a vendor that
yeah,
sells their services to lots of campaigns, and that's not proof of any conspiracy. It's just proof that they're a vendor that people go to.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I'm pretty. I can't. Sometimes I'm thinking. I'll think about the primary, and I'll just think I just want to wake up and have it all be over. Can that happen? Because it's
We
stressful just
all
thinking
do.
about. Yeah.
Um, what I try to remind everybody though is, and this is something that I think we need to think about in America a lot more. As Americans, a lot of we always like everything to be easier. What's the
Hmm.
easy way? How do we do this easier and faster? Well, democracy and freedom aren't the easy way. Like dictatorship's the easy way. Then you got one person telling everybody what to do. That's easy,
Hmm.
but is that better? And so we gotta start thinking, well, this is the better way. Yes,
Yeah.
it's messier. Yes, it takes longer. Yes, people whose opinions I disagree with have to get taken into account.
Hmm.
But that's part of freedom and democracy is like coming to that consensus, testing our ideas, testing our candidates, finding those weaknesses. That's what a primary is for. And you know, look at 2008. Obama and Hillary had a knockdown, drag out, lengthy
Yeah.
primary. It was dirty, it was nasty, it was messy. And I remember all the headlines. Are Dems too divided? Are they going to be able to take advantage of this? And, like,
It's a
you
work
know
like
what?
that actual primary was worse than literally anything people try to say is happening now.
Oh, no doubt.
It
No
was
doubt.
horrible. I
It
remember
was
that.
dirty. There was racist shit going on. It was bad. And yet we came together and we elected a guy named Barack Hussein Obama that
For two
I didn't think
terms.
could win. You know,
Yeah.
I'll admit I was one of those Democrats who was like, "Oh, are you kidding me? We're gonna elect a guy named Barack Hussein Obama after 8 years of Bush? I don't know about this." Like, I was like, I'm not sure, but he won me over throughout that primary process. And despite the fact that I had supported Hillary throughout the primary, I saw him become a stronger, better candidate for it. Like she tested him in ways that like prepared him for the job and prepared him to be the leader of the ticket. And that's why afterwards, despite all the nastiness, he reached out to her and said, "Hey, I need you as part of my team to be Secretary of State because, like, you've got experience that I don't. And, like, I know you're tough as nails. Like, I need that toughness." Like, and so I just, what I hope is that as supporters, that we don't take personally what the candidates may feel at each other personally at moments
Hmm.
because they're gonna have their personal spats. Like it's clear, Pete
Yeah.
and Amy do
Yeah.
not like each other. They
Yeah.
do not. Like there's a whole lot of reasons for it, but it's obvious.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, either one of them becomes the nominee, they're immediately getting right behind the other, and they're gonna be out there cheering them on
Hmm.
because they understand that while we're competitors today, we still got to come together to defeat the real enemy in November. And all the signs are that we can do that. Uh, you and I have had some spirited discussions. I'm not a believer that Bernie can necessarily do that, but I actually think Bernie has a better chance than Bloomberg.
Oh,
And if it
definitely.
comes down to Bernie versus Bloomberg, I'd rather take my chances with Bernie if it had to come to that. And I think the biggest threat that we should be uniting around right now is basically anybody but Bloomberg. Because I worry if if he's installed at convention and it
Mhm.
just reeks of him just throwing his money around to buy the delegates,
Yeah.
no matter how much inoculation I've tried to do talking to folks about the delegate process now, that's going to look dirty. It's
Yeah.
going to look dirty to even people like me who are okay with the delegate process as it is.
Hmm.
Like, that's just going to look dirty. And
Yeah.
frankly, I'm a moderate voter who's a lawyer and like supposed to be the moderate, respectable country over party type that Mike Bloomberg's supposed to be speaking to. But
Hmm.
he's not speaking to me.
Yeah.
Like he's not reaching me. And I should be in his target demographic. So if he's losing people like me, then I could not at all blame folks who are supporters of Bernie if he goes in with close to 40% of the delegates and Bloomberg buys the nomination. I'll be marching in the streets with you because like that's going to be gross.
Yeah.
It's going to be the end of our party. I mean,
Definitely. Like that's another thing I'm afraid of is if Bloomberg even is the nominee, like I doubt he could beat Trump in November, but like even if he's the nominee, that's bad for the party as a whole. Like
yeah,
that's I don't know if we would ever be able to recover from that. Like
I don't. I think it would just we would sink just into authoritarianism because people will just give up.
yeah.
And that's the worst thing we can do right now. You know, giving up is exactly what Trump and Putin want us to do. They want to keep us divided. I know they're definitely running some of the supposed Bernie accounts that are out there attacking people.
Yeah.
Some of them are real people, and I know you and I have talked, and there are some folks who get a little heated,
Yeah.
that are real people. But there's also a lot of these bots and trolls out there that aren't real accounts of real people
Yeah.
that are sowing discord, and they're helping push conspiracy theories about the Iowa app. And, they want us to already be questioning everything so that we can't come out of that convention united. And
Hmm.
so it's going to be on all of us to not let that happen and to know that, hey, I may be an Amy supporter, you may be a Bernie supporter, but ultimately we've both coming at this because we want a government that works better for working people, that's not just tilted to the billionaires. And like we can put that unites us over this divisiveness. And I think, we got to familiarize ourselves with these delegate rules. We got to understand what this is leading to so we can lobby the super delegates, so we can lobby our state's delegates, the people who get elected at these state conventions to go be our delegates at the national convention.
Hmm.
We got to lobby those folks to know that Bloomberg's a no-go.
Yeah.
And we got to start that now. We can't wait till July because the longer we wait, the more it gets in people's heads that his propaganda works.
Yeah, it does.
And
Especially those Obama ads, the ones with him and
yeah,
Obama. People told me that their black moms or grandmas saw that and thought positively of Bloomberg afterwards, and I was like, "Whoa, like
they think
Bloomberg needs to be
Obama
stopped."
endorsed it.
Yeah,
And, and I'm all for free speech, and it gets really tricky to regulate free
yeah,
speech. But in one of the problems of the Trump era that we've run into is since we don't want to regulate free speech, there's always been some kind of norms in politics. And some of those norms that we kind of all abided by on both the Democratic and Republican side, in my experience, was you don't overplay your hand just because you worked with some member of the other party in some bipartisan way on a discrete issue. You
yeah,
might bring it up a couple times and use it sparingly here and there to show your bipartisanship or something.
hmm,
But to run it like as a full on 30-second, full throated endorsement type ad,
yeah,
that really pushes the boundaries of good taste. It pushes the norms out even further of what we kind of expect out of political ads. And while we may not be able to regulate them, it's really dangerous to start breaking those norms because it's going to throw chaos and confusion and misinformation into the mix. And yeah, just everything about the Bloomberg candidacy really bothers me to the core as someone who wants to save our democracy. from our drift to authoritarianism.
Yeah. So is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we end the call?
I think that covers pretty much everything I have to say. I'm quite talkative, so I'm sure I've talked your ear off here. And hey to the viewers, hope this has been informative and helpful in some ways.
All right. Well,
Can I ask any band stuff?
oh yes. So what kind of music do you listen to?
Uh, the I have a pretty wide range of stuff. A lot of what I've been listening to lately, since I moved to Minnesota a couple years ago, I've really gotten into the Minnesota hip hop scene.
Oh yeah.
Um, the Rhyme Sayers label and the Doomtree label. They have artists like Dessa at Doomtree that I really like her stuff. Atmosphere and Aesop Rock and Greaves off of the Rhyme Sayers label. Um, yeah, a lot of that lately. Still a big fan of Tool.
Okay.
Actually, recently re-listened to some old Marilyn Manson that I was into in like high school and college days, and I was like, man, these albums held up pretty good. I still like this stuff. All right, I wasn't just a crazy person.
Did you listen to Tool's new album that came out last year?
I did. It's pretty good. It's definitely Tool.
Yeah.
There's not any single song that has grabbed me the way some of the like single songs on other albums have grabbed me. But it's just a solid album all the way through that I can like throw on and just work to and not get annoyed by anything that comes on the album. So
Yeah.
it's just a good solid album, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you ever into anything like Corn or Limp Bizkit?
I really didn't like Limp Bizkit at all. Fred Durst just bugged the crap out of me for some reason.
Bugged
I don't
everyone
I don't
back
even
then.
remember why, but like there's just something about him that just struck me wrong. Sorry, no offense. Uh, I did like some Corn stuff, definitely. They were really big, like my sophomore year of college in 2000.
Hmm. What about Linkin Park?
I liked some of their stuff back in the day. Definitely that earlier stuff,
Yeah.
when it had that good mixture of like kind of hard raw edge to it with just some good rhymes. Um, yeah, definitely.
All right. So where can we find you on social media?
I am at Oklasota Gal. That's OKLASOTA Gal on Twitter, and I believe that's also my what's the Instagram.
Hmm.
I think that's also my Instagram.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
You betcha. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.